Okay, so we're going to graph y equals secant x minus pi over 2. And step number 1, class, is to do what? What's the reciprocal of secant? Okay, we're not going to write 1 over cosine. We're just going to write cosine. Oh, have we done this before?
Yes, there's 3 of them.
I can make out that one.
Oh.
I can't. Horrendous one. Double check all the papers again. Inside out. Show another student before you throw it away. Okay, so I want you guys to graph this one, and then in about 3 minutes I'm going to check in on you, okay? Alright, Juan. A value. B value.
1.
C value.
Pi over 2.
D value.
There's no D value. This is 0.
What does the A value tell me? What is your amplitude?
1.
What does your B value tell you?
This is the equation of 2 pi over D is equal to n equal to just 2 pi.
C value. Which direction?
Horizontal.
Yes, left or right? Right. Pi over 2. Now, because you have a phase shift, you can put it between 0 and 2 pi. This is going to tell me where it's going to be. Everything to the right of the trig function. Just want to make it abundantly clear that I am working with this one here highlighted in blue. So x minus pi over 2. We're going to add pi over 2 to both sides. Ho 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 ho. Half the students, well, no, I shouldn't say half. Maybe 1 out of 4 students wrote 3 pi over 2. I'm laughing because I was on your quiz. Yes? 2 pi over 1 times 2 is 4 pi over 2. 1 pi over 2. This gives me 4 plus 1 is 5 pi over 2. Raise your hand if you got that. So this will be my start on my graph, and this will be the end. So normally we would have our 5 values. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But it's being shifted pi over 2. So I'm not going to start at the origin. I'm going to start at that point. That's where I'm counting my 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have pi over 2. 5 pi over 2. So 1 plus 5 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is what? 3 pi over 2. This one's kind of nice because 1 plus 3 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So 2 pi over 2, which just produces 2 pi. So pi over 2. 3 pi over 2. 4 pi over 2, which is 2 pi. And then 5 pi over 2. I'm going to make my x values. Pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi, and 5 pi over 2. I'm creating my table of values. So with my x value now, I'm working in the blue box. I'm going to subtract pi over 2. So take these values and subtract pi over 2. So x minus pi over 2. X minus pi over 2. Pi over 2 minus pi over 2 is? We'll finish this tomorrow. Vaughn, you here? Vaughn. There you are. Pi minus pi over 2. 3 pi over 2 minus pi over 2. It's 2 pi over 2, which is pi. 2 pi, which is 4 pi over 2 minus 1 pi over 2.
3 pi over 2.
And 5 pi over 2 minus pi over 2.
2 pi.
4 pi over 2, which is 2 pi. Good job. So we took down our x values. We're subtracting pi over 2. Now we're going to evaluate cosine. If you have not done so already, put a huge blue box around the reciprocal, right? Brian, what is cosine at 0? Pi over 2?
0.
Pi? 3 pi over 2. 2 pi? Or sorry, 3 pi over 2? Oh, that should have been over here. 3 pi over 2?
0.
And 2 pi.
1.
Yep. Alright, I want to make this clear, so I'm going to graph this in green. And I might use a green color pencil, it's a little bit lighter. Now I know what my max is. I'll just arbitrarily put it here. So I have 4 boxes, so 4 boxes for -1. Pi over 2, 1. Pi, 0. 3 pi over 2, -1. Right, 2 pi, 0. And 5 pi over 2, 1. You can use dotted lines or a very faint line. This is our graph of cosine. Partner A, tell partner B the next step from your formula sheet or your notes. Alonzo, our next steps? Everyone put your finger at the x-intercepts. So right there, we're going to put our 2 vertical asymptotes. Alright, the other person, tell them what's the next step. Raisin? Alright, put your finger on this one here. Go to the maximum or minimum. The graph is below, yes? The green one? So we're going to graph the opposite, which is above. If I kept graphing the green dotted line, it would look like this, right? So our graph for is going to be in red. Put your finger between the purple. Put your finger at the minimum. The graph is like all the way up here, so we're going to do the opposite, so the graph's going to be what? Down. And it's just going to keep alternating. Put your finger at the maximum. So the graph is like all here, so you're going to go above it. Let's review what we did. We were graphing secant. I should have done that in purple. Secant, its reciprocal is cosine. So actually, I graphed cosine here in green. And the reciprocal, that's flipping, right? The red one is actually the graph of secant. So, a number one mistake for students in here is they didn't highlight one of these above, and they actually tried to then evaluate secant. Don't do that. You're just graphing cosine. You're not, and then you do above and below, and then really that green one kind of goes away. You don't have to erase it, but you don't want to make it prominent, where the feature is there's a graph in red.